Would you be surprised to find out that under US President Joe Biden and his new Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, that the US is just going to continue on with its belligerence towards China, and in particular in its attempt to transform the South China Sea maritime disputes into a major international crisis? Would you be surprised to find out that that was still going on under Biden, as it had been going on under Trump for 4 years and under Obama-Biden for 8 years, basically? You shouldn't be surprised. And here is Reuters. U.S. stands with Southeast Asian countries against China pressure. Blinken says the United States rejects China's maritime claims in the South China Sea beyond what it is permitted under international law, and stands with Southeast Asian countries resisting its pressure, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said on Wednesday. Well, it's funny listening to the U.S. talk about international law when the U.S. is a country that travels halfway around the world to illegally invade and occupy entire countries. The U.S. right now is illegally occupying Syria. It was not invited by the legitimate, recognized government of Syria in Damascus. It was not authorized by the UN in any shape, form, or way to go into Syria. It just did. And now it's lecturing China about international laws and norms. Well, the US helps set those norms by what it does internationally. And now it's telling China, it's okay for us to do it. It's not okay for you to allegedly do it. Now, the conflict in the South China Sea, this is an area that has multiple overlapping claims. So it's not just China versus here they're saying the Philippines, Brunei, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Taiwan. Taiwan is part of China, so how does Taiwan have an overlapping claim with itself? That makes no sense. But again, this is part of the US's argument. It doesn't make sense. It's just them creating a major crisis so that they can justify a military presence in the region vis-a-vis China. Now, the Philippines, Brunei, Vietnam, Malaysia, and China all have overlapping claims with each other. Not just China and all of these countries, but all of these countries together amongst themselves have overlapping claims. And they will occasionally have disputes. Fishing vessels will be seized, people will be detained, and they're just disputes, and every country has different versions of this. And just to make my point, this was from just at the end of last year, 4 Navy ships to help protect fishing waters in case of no-deal Brexit. 2 vessels to be deployed at sea with 2 on standby in case EU fishing boats enter the exclusive economic zone of the UK. So even the UK is going to have armed ships to deter EU fishing vessels from entering waters that it claims. So it happens between all nations, and the thing is, you don't want to create a giant crisis out of it. It's a dispute that can be dealt with bilaterally. And that's what Southeast Asia is doing. That's what ASEAN does. At the ASEAN summit annually, they talk about the South China Sea. There are many maritime disputes there, not just with China, but with each other. And they talk about how you have to reasonably settle these disputes. And the US, their goal is to take these minor disputes and turn them into an international crisis, a regional and international crisis. And just to give you an example of this was from the New York Times. This was from a while ago, 2016. Tribunal rejects Beijing's claims in South China Sea. An international tribunal in The Hague delivered a sweeping rebuke on Tuesday of China's behavior in the South China Sea. The landmark case brought by the Philippines was seen as an important crossroads in China's rise as a global power and its rivalry with the United States, and it could force Beijing to reconsider its assertive tactics in the region or risk being labeled an international outlaw. The truth actually is, the US brought this case to The Hague. They represented the Philippines, and even after this verdict was delivered in the Philippines' favor, the Philippines did not use this verdict as leverage against China. They decided to ignore the US and its attempts to insert itself into this dispute, and they decided to bilaterally settle this with China themselves. And of course, all of these countries, despite these disputes, all still do business with China, a lot of business with China. They aren't even close to being adversaries, not even close to being on the same, stance as the US is with China right now. So Again, this is the US trying to divide and destroy the region, divide everyone against each other, to use Southeast Asia as a battering ram against China. For the US's own best interests, and of course at the cost of everyone involved in Southeast Asia. Could you imagine if there was some sort of adversarial scenario between Southeast Asia and China? What would that do to the economy of the entire Asian region? It would destroy it. And no one in the region is actually interested in doing this. So that's why when Blinken, now US Secretary of State, he's echoing Mike Pompeo, and these boisterous calls for confrontation with China are not being met by Southeast Asia. They don't want anything to do with this. So the US is basically claiming they're going to stand up and champion for the region when the region itself is not interested. They don't see it as a threat. They are here in the region and they don't see it as a threat. This is the US doing exactly what it does everywhere else. Creates a crisis so that it can insert itself into it and justify a military presence to assert what they themselves call primacy. And now, this is a 2015 policy paper out of the Council on Foreign Relations. And as I've said many times, this is what the US does. This is how foreign policy is determined. Giant corporate-funded think tanks create the policy, and then they send it to Washington to get rubber stamped by Congress and by the White House. And if you look through this revising US grand strategy towards China, and you look up the word primacy, okay, it's mentioned 14 times in here because the American effort to integrate China into the liberal international order has now generated new threats to US primacy in Asia and could eventually result in a consequential challenge to American power globally. Washington needs a new grand strategy toward China that centers on balancing the rise of Chinese power rather than continuing to assist its ascendancy. So what they're talking about is the US has primacy over Asia, even though it isn't located in Asia, isn't an Asian country, but they're saying that they should hold primacy over Asia. They should stop anyone in the region, including China, especially China, from being able to assert primacy over themselves, over their own region that they are actually located in. It's modern day imperialism. And if you look at the role of the South China Sea, the disputes here, they openly admit that it's a point where they could use as an excuse to militarize their presence in the region. It says it right here. Washington should increase the frequency and duration of naval exercises with South China Sea littoral states, which means, everyone bordering the South China Sea. They want to get them involved in militarizing this dispute. So if you thought Biden was going to change anything, think again. This is continuing. This is exactly where Trump left off. It started with the pivot to Asia under Obama with Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. It intensified under Trump with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and now it is continuing without missing a beat under US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken under the administration of US President Joe Biden. So it's going to continue. Keep an eye on the South China Sea disputes and America's attempts to take it from just disputes and turn it into a major conflict. And now that you know about this and in the background to the South China Sea, situation, when you see it pop up in the news, you're going to recognize the game that the US is actually playing. So to my Patreon patrons who make these videos possible on a day-to-day basis, thank you so much for your support. Please like and share the video if you thought it was useful. Please think about subscribing to my channel. It helps the channel grow and it's totally free to do. Look in the video description below for the links to all of these references and also for ways you can help support my work, like by becoming a Patreon member. And to everyone helping me in every single way, thank you so much, because I couldn't do this without that support. I greatly appreciate it. And as always, thank you for watching.